Hi everyone, this is Fede and I am the host of Culture Art, the podcast about the internationality of students in Groningen in all its facets. Are you ready? Hi everyone, and welcome to Culture Art, my personal podcast, in which I have the big pleasure and honor to introduce everyone in the international field that I have the big honor and pleasure, of course, to live during my master experience here in Groningen. Today, I am very happy to interview this very interesting and clever guy, one of my university colleagues in my master course. Welcome, Cyrus. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very interested and fascinated to see what we discuss over the next few hours.
Cute. Yeah, and we have to discuss about many things because your path is very interesting, huge, multi-phase, characterized by many experiences. So I can't wait to go a little bit in detail about it. But first of all, I would like to ask you a more general question about yourself. How would you like to describe yourself? By your personal perspective.
It's a good question. If I were to reflect on me, I'd say I'm someone who's all about play. I'm someone who's all about lightness and generally fun. I don't want to take the world far too seriously. We're surrounded by, not only in our course, but in life in general, such serious topics. And those moments when you can lose touch with it, enjoy being in the mountains in nature or somewhere abroad, and remind yourself that life can just be a little bit silly, a little bit playful. That's the way I describe myself.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, interesting and good perspective to cope with the everyday life, of course. So you studied philosophy and English literature, right? But you are also very passionate about other topics like analysis about different scenarios, geopolitical, economics, politics. You also did many volunteering experience in India, Vietnam, and other surrounding countries. And you work for a company in home country in England. So many things mix up together. Now try to understand a little bit more. What is the connection line between all of these varied experiences, evaluating this situation, of course, now after some years?
I'd say it's an interesting thing to try and reflect upon those experiences and how I managed to get here. And I'd say the thing has been a little bit of curiosity and a little bit of self-discovery. Right? And there was never a path set out for me where I had done these volunteering experiences and then had planned to go into a job and then had planned to come to university. None of that happened chronologically. It was all a matter of being in a position in my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew there was something missing, and there were some things that I had to try and figure out in myself. What am I enjoying at the moment? What interests me? What do I find meaningful? And you can tell that from my volunteering experiences. What drew me towards that was having spent so much time traveling. The thing I wanted to do was to give back to the spaces and the places that I'd been. The whole idea of working for a social enterprise, an NGO, was so attractive at the time. And so I did it. And I also came to the end of that experience realizing there was so much that I enjoyed, but so much that was also missing from that experience. And in that case, it was that I wanted something that was going to be more related to the cities and to the markets. And hence, again, I just happened to go back, happened to find a job, and that job was related to the markets. So at each stage, I think I've learnt a little bit more that's allowed me to open up some doors, but then confidently say, I'm happy to close this door, and I don't think I'm going to continue down there. So it's been a process of opening and closing doors.
Interesting. So it's sort of a puzzle of yourself, your personality. You try to fulfill, correct me if I am saying something wrong, some gaps that your feelings to have in your not only personality, of course, in your personal studies, university, and working background with apparently completely different type of experiences, but with a clear logic for yourself, for your personal growth and developing, right?
Definitely. It's never a matter of it's never been a matter of things being in a very straight line. It's always been meandering constantly. And throughout that meandering, I've definitely made mistakes in going to places where I thought I would thoroughly enjoy the experience, where I take a lot out of it. It's something we can discuss later with one of the volunteering experiences. But each of those moments, the mistake or the things that I experienced where I closed more doors were probably as valuable as the moments where I really thoroughly enjoyed it and I realized this is something I could really continue doing. So both of those were, really important experiences for me.
Interesting, interesting. A very, yeah, peculiar viewing of living a life. So you born and raised in a multicultural environment in the North East London area when you attended, of course, secondary school, and later you moved to Staffordshire University when you obtained your bachelor in art science, so philosophy and English literature. How do you think being surrounded by this multicultural field environment, people from all over the world, has influenced and impact your personal choices, professional choices as well, in traveling, volunteering, and now attending again this university course work in the past, in your opinion?
Let me give you an example of this. So, even going fast forward, when I first arrived in Groningen, I was living in a place called Harden, just outside, just for 2 weeks. And I thought this is a good opportunity, jump on a bike, cycling to Groningen and see the entire city. And I thought, to me, this is going to be a full day because I looked at Groningen from a map and I saw the big circle and I thought there's so much to go and explore. It took me 20 minutes to cycle around Groningen. And I was going down every side street looking for an ethnic Indonesian restaurant, a Surinamese restaurant, or an Indian restaurant. And I found a few scattering bits. And at that moment, my heart started to pound. I was a little bit nervous and anxious because I'm so used to that London buzz where you've got not only the size, the scale of it, it's not a city, it's an entire country, it's a state in itself. But in every corner of every neighborhood, there is a small community from halfway across the world speaking their language, making their food, doing their traditions and their activities and their festivals. And it's a pocket of just international life. And that's, in many ways, it's such a privilege to live in a city where you have access to that on your doorstep. And of course, these are communities who have come from halfway across the world and come to a place in London where they feel most familiar, most at home, but equally are also so welcoming of anyone to come and experience their culture. You can imagine the pride that people have when you have a Uyghur neighborhood in London who has an Indian and perhaps a British person and somebody ethnically Chinese who comes and eats in their restaurant and says, how are you enjoying it? So it very much shaped me. And it was, I think, an experience of learning, having it become normalized that you can live in such cosmopolitan international spaces with very little friction.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in fact, sometimes living in, it's a good point, in a country or in a city as well, that it's not so huge, so big in size, in inhabitants. You can experience as well the fact that you're being surrounded by people all over the world, despite you are in a small city. Yeah, it's something curious, but yeah, it's true, and absolutely, I totally agree with you with your point of view. Again, your perspective in living life, enjoying every day, day by day. It's something amazing, and thank you so much for sharing with this enthusiastic mood.
No, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
But the one thing I will say, and you must agree with me on this, the one thing that makes these cosmopolitan, diverse cities so beautiful is the cultural side of it. It's the arts, it's the music, and personally for me, it's the food. The fact that you can walk down a street and you can sit in a restaurant and you can have the food that's been eaten in the corners of Southeast Asia to the same sort of specific flavor pattern, and you know it's good when you've got a 60, 70-year-old Malaysian grandma who's cooking that food for you in the back, and she's serving you authentic dishes. This is the reason why I love big cities. You must feel exactly the same thing from being surrounded by and going to these big cities, no?
Yeah, so the knowledge of complex cultures and multicultural fields pass, of course, through as well food, cuisine, and this culture that is a crucial part of the culture of every country as well, of course. Yeah, going more in detail about another experience you did in Vietnam in particular, where you worked as an English teacher. I would like to ask you if you want to share this experience, in particular in the light of what kind of skills you had to develop and put in practice in particular, I think a completely different context field, which is of course Vietnam, in comparison to England, the country where you were born and raised, very developed, organized, known all over the world, to be very precise in many sides. So
it was very different. Yeah, it was very, very different working there. This was my first proper long-term job that I held, was working and teaching in Vietnam. And I worked across 3 or 4 different schools. And each of those schools had very different, unique challenges to working there. So, for instance, in one of the private academic institutions or foundations that I worked at, everything ran like clockwork. It was very, very good. They were very organized. They were, everyone was on time. I would get my curriculum 2-3 weeks beforehand and have enough time to study the whole thing and then teach it. So there it felt very simple and very easy. On the other hand, I worked in some other smaller tuition places and private education facilities, and there it was less organized. There was a really significant difference between the cultural aspects. In the one previously GPA, they were the students who were there were very Americanized and anglicized. These are people who had already taken trips to Europe or taken trips to America. It was more simple to be able to communicate with them. On the other hand, the other schools, there was definitely a dissonance, a difference. And so one of the challenges was trying to not only communicate with my students, but also communicate with my teaching assistants to be able to facilitate, to do a lesson that was going to be engaging, that was also going to be understood. And I mean understood not only in terms of language, but in terms of norms and different ideals. So it was challenging in that aspect. I mean, the teaching experience had, I think the main skills that I developed in that was definitely communication. It was definitely working with kids. I mean, working with kids is not as simple as perhaps it's made out to be. It can be very challenging, and they can test patience. But all in all, it's equally probably one of the most gratifying things you can do when at the end of a lesson, the kids are sad to see you go home. So yeah, I think communication, one of the big things. Working with kids was another one. And other skills, I would say, I think being someone who is able to work with kids and communicate, it brings in a sense of storytelling. I think that was the third and final thing, which is a little bit of a mixture between the first two. If I'm telling I'm teaching a lesson or communicating with students and my peers, the most important thing is trying to tell a story in a way that they will understand and they find engaging, and they're going to stand behind me and follow either my advice or follow my lesson. So I'd say those are the three things that were useful.
Amazing. And about the other volunteering experience you did during more or less 2 years, right? Yeah, very long period abroad. Yeah, would you like to share other skills that you developed, or you simply tell the different steps you did during your trips around the world, and in particular in the eastern part of the world? Yeah.
I think with the two volunteering experiences, it's interesting using the word skill, because I have no doubts that there are some things that added to my skills, but they were more experiences than skills. They shaped me in a very important way. They shaped me in a very, very important way. And I believe if I hadn't done them, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I also wouldn't have made the decisions that I did directly after the volunteering experience. But in terms of skills, the likelihood is that I didn't spend enough time to be able to truly develop hard skills. The things that I took away from those volunteering experiences were, I'd say, opening up my perspective. There were things that put me in a situation where I never would have seen a side of India that I would have been able to if I just traveling through. So an example of one of them is the People's Vigilance Committee on Human Rights, the PVCHR. This was an organization that worked with Dalits, they call it, untouchables, who are people who sit in the lowest caste of the Indian caste system. You have 5 different hierarchical castes, and they sit right at the bottom. As a result of that, they're typically exposed to quite a bit of abuse. They're mostly living in poverty. They haven't got access to healthcare, education on the same scale as other people in that hierarchy. And they're also not given access to jobs. So they're a tremendously oppressed minority in India. Now, this organization worked with Dalits, but they also worked with Muslim minorities, and they also worked against domestic abuse against women. So this is a phenomenon. This is something that happens, of course, in India, but you never get exposed to it unless you work with an organization and truly see what happens on the ground in people's villages and in people's towns. So a lot of the work that we did was reading over case reports of events that had taken place. This could be domestic abuse, it could be rape, it could be beatings. They have things such as honor killing, which is a sort of a very sad strategic attack on women who are considered to have been either abused by other men. So it's really sad and very harrowing content to listen to and to observe. But the important thing was that we worked with this organization and we got to see it happen, and we got to see solutions actually impacting people's lives. And so the experience of doing the NGO work in India was very much a life experience. It definitely drew a lot of inspiration towards the effectiveness of NGOs, how much people are really coming up with good solutions and working to deal with poverty in India, and also a better understanding of what Indians think, particularly in this area. What is the sort of cultural norms? How are they getting along ethnically with other groups within India? And how does this all relate to, in some way, the thing that I was interested in, to the politics of India? How can this be connected to what happens in the ivory towers of Delhi? So yeah, it was I wouldn't say skill was something I took away from it, but experience is something that was incredibly impactful.
Okay, experience is the key word and concept connected to the volunteering experience as well. You did. Okay, perfect. And about another side that I would like to know better from you, for your perspective in particular, because you are an eager, as I mentioned, of politics, economics, and geopolitical scenarios in general. Analysis. So, would you like to give some pieces of suggestion to whom is interest in the same field, but he's or her not very sure about how to become well informed in these interesting, of course, fields, but I think a little bit with inflection in everyday scenarios where media share too much information about it, social, TV, so networks, and a person could be a little bit, I don't know, where can I find reliable sources, information about it?
Sure. So there's always the traditional routes of doing so, right? You read newspapers.
Okay.
All newspapers, even if you don't get a physical copy, I love physical copies, but even if you just go online and look on your phone and download some of the local news apps from your country, wherever that be. In the UK's case, I have the BBC News, I have the Guardian, I read The Economist online, I read Foreign Affairs online, the Financial Times. The thing when I'm looking for online news sources, I want to get the full spectrum. I don't want to just read newspapers on the right. I don't want to just read newspapers on the left. I want to see what all of them say so I can then make up my opinion. So that's a good one. Something which I've listened to and done a lot of is what we're doing partially today as podcasts. Podcast is something which you wouldn't have found really, really good news podcasts, at least in the UK, before 5 years ago. And now suddenly, I listen to 3 hours of podcasts a day on politics, at least a minimum. And I'll listen to the UK ones, which is news agents, rest is politics, some US ones like NPR, and you can listen to the Financial Times, The Economist. There's so much content out there. And I find it actually has become my more popular choice. I'd rather listen to a podcast than sometimes read a newspaper because it's an engagement, it's a debate, it's a discussion. Which brings me on to my final tip, which is just speak to people. Sit down when you're in a pub or in a cafe and have a chat with them and ask somebody, what do you think about, doesn't have to be a policy, but what do you think about this geopolitical event that's taken place? And it's quite easy to be able to say, oh, no, I don't really know much about this, so I'm not going to get involved. I probably am not the right person to do so. That's fine. You can accept that you're not really educated on it. But what we have as humans that is beautiful is we have intuition. We have a sense of a moral compass which struggles to find where north is. And there's nothing better than sitting down, discussing with somebody. There's a word in German or a phrase in German, which I forgot the name, but in translation it's called semi-dangerous thoughts, which are thoughts that are not backed up necessarily by evidence, but you're kind of interpreting, you're going off of intuition. This is how I feel, there's something wrong with this. That's the best place to start off. You come up with ideas, you have thoughts, and then you can go home and you can reflect on those thoughts and read up about them and realize, actually, I was correct. Or actually, no, that was probably not the right way to think. So very important to discuss.
Thank you so much for these pieces of information, these tips in particular, the last you mentioned, that it could be the easiest one, as you told, but absolutely the most important. Speaking with people, because thinking more in detail and more clever about it, politics, basically born in this way. So in ancient Greek, in ancient Roman and Empire, when people surrounded together in a table or in a square in particular, talks about problems, issues, the most important things related to the society. And it's, of course, as you mentioned, a good way to improve personal, I think, oratory skills, to be more ashamed sometimes. Introverted, for introverted people, it's a good exercise.
Yeah, hey, I so agree with that. And what's the point in politics if you're not going out there to change people's minds and to encourage them, to work with them, collaborate with them, to be diplomatic and negotiate with them and try to understand or try to build a consensus, a middle ground. That's the ideal thing. And it's also, I'd say, the thing that's most exciting about politics. You can read a newspaper article and there's something which you read which you think, wow, that's really impressive. I never thought of that perspective before. But there's nothing quite like the thrill of sitting in front of somebody who disagrees with you and then really trying to outmaneuver them, to try and say, you're not thinking about this, you're not thinking about that, to have a discussion and a debate. It's sort of like boxing in some ways, or fencing.
Yeah.
It's not meant to harm, but it's meant to test the defense and to test your own attack. And the good thing is you may come both from this discussion that you have over a beer without any knowledge, and you realize actually my attack wasn't good, and the person thought my defense wasn't good. And that encourages you to go home and read up about it and then try and attack again.
Yeah, it's something that can also to encourage in a polite and educate dialogue. That's something. It's something that missing sometimes, in particular in sharing by media. Yeah. We can see, unfortunately, we can watch, in particular in media, something not so good in this sense. People that like to scream, shout, over talk with their voice, but it's not a good way. And I think that I have to say it's an English, a little bit an English mood, the mood that you explained me, to be polite, clever, try to understand, oh, what can I build a better reply, answer to this question, to this issue. Yeah, interesting. And about another field, because this multi-phase and multi-purpose guy, we have to talk about many topics. What was it like to return to university after years of work, volunteering? Yes, still, so now not a practical experience, but a more theory related experience.
It was nerve-wracking at the beginning. It wasn't something that I was excited about it, and it was something which had come across my mind a few times in the 6 months before I'd left my job. But it wasn't an easy decision, and I was definitely nervous that I would be taking a step back in my career. Of course, unlike a lot of the people who are studying the masters who are between 21 and 25, 26, so I was 28 when I started, and there was a part of me that had, of course, grown up with people of my age, school friends, university friends, who are, in some cases, 5 years into their career. In other cases, they've got kids. And in other cases, they've got a house. So these people who are all developing in their life at the same age group. And then here I was, decided to go back to university. So there was a little bit of anxiousness. Am I making the right decision? Should I just be moving forward and continuing with that wave and getting a secure job, finding a house, settling down? These were the things that there was in the back of my head. You could say the devil on the shoulders, and the devil was saying, you shouldn't be doing this. And so it definitely took a bit of time to be able to come to terms with it. I had discussed this with friends. I talked about it with my family and all sorts. And they were all very encouraging. And they all reminded me that even though I'm 28, some people may be 21 or 22, I'm still in a stage of my life where I can shape my career, and I'm quite free to be able to do so. I haven't got a mortgage. I haven't got any kids. It's a space and a time for me to be able to take risks and to be able to see if those risks pay off. So the decision to come to university wasn't necessarily the easiest one. And now being here, I've realized the things that, again, like I mentioned to you about those experiences, closing some doors, opening others. I've realized truly, and I've confirmed that the topic I'm studying, I love and I adore it. And it's not something that I ever want to close my hand on a book. It's something that I want to continue studying and I want to continue being involved with in some way, shape, or form. The doors I've closed are academia. The doors I've closed are working and studying in a purely academic environment. Because the thing I've missed in these experiences is the real world, going out there, meeting people, challenging people, getting into situations where you develop and you learn, you bring new skills and you share new skills. These are the things that I adored, and I've realized, having had experiences of it with the volunteer experience or working in the company back in the UK and London. The thing I've missed is being involved with people and making a change. So now, if I reflect on the experience, do I regret it? Not whatsoever. It's been a phenomenal experience, and above all else, I feel very grateful that I've had the opportunity to come and do it, and grateful to myself that I actually took the risk and did so. Moving forward, I now know what I'd like to refocus on and where I'd like to move into.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely. I am completely, yeah, I worship you very much for, again, this very mature and very well built, complex personal viewings of lives, of things. The fact that you are feeling grateful, it's important, and it's not something take for granted. Um, yeah, in the ongoing debate of everything, for in particular for uh, guys that are more lucky for some sides. It's something important. Remember, I'm studying, so I am lucky for this reason, first of all, and I would like to enjoy and to exploit this experience at the best of my possibilities. So thank you so much for this talk. Very interesting, full of points to reflect. But to conclude, I would like to ask you if now you have already plans for your future. Would you like to, I don't know, do other trips around the world? What of what yeah, doors would you like to open again, to use this metaphorical expression?
Sure. Well, okay, so let's put it like that. If I look at the maze now that we're all going through in life, and the maze that I've been going through, I've shut out the doors that have said that I will be sitting in an office from abroad and not leaving that office. I've shut the door on academia as an area of just focusing purely on research. I've also shut the door on places that are going to be focused purely on private sector markets and economics. The things that are open is politics and political economy. Living abroad and being immersed in the place that I'm going to be studying and researching, and doing something which is going to be a mixture of ultimately providing development, providing in some way an advancement or just general goodness to the world through my work. So if I were to look at the future, I've always said that I'm not the kind of person to be able to paint a picture of the silhouette or the figure that sits very far in the background. Instead, I see a very faded silhouette, and every day I get closer and closer, and I can draw a little bit of an eyebrow or a hat or whatever it is, right? And as I get closer, I've realized that at least in the near future, I need to be abroad somewhere. Definitely. I want to be immersed in a place that's different from London and different from the UK. Ideally, I want to be somewhere in a world of politics that I find interesting, which is why, in many ways, I'm very interested in moving to India and becoming immersed in the politics in India. And the other thing is I want to be doing on the ground solution making. I'm happy to do research. I'm happy to provide recommendations. But what I want to do is to create policy that actually affects people's lives, as opposed to being discussed and studied in high circles of ivory towers and universities. So that would be the ideal. Constantly moving, constantly changing, and constantly meeting new people.
Interesting, absolutely amazing. So thank you so much again for all of these pieces of information, suggestions, and tips in particular. I think that many people, in particular youngers, listening your words can have more clear ideas about some topics that are a little bit debatable, thanks to your very positive and energetic viewings, and that the future will deserve whatever you want. Absolutely.
I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me on. It's been a wonderful format. I've really enjoyed the questions, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
I hope that my English from the native English speaker was
fantastic. I understood every
English
single word.
teacher in particular. I am not a Vietnam.
I'm going to give you some marks down.
Yeah. Be kind, finally. Yeah. And for all the listener, this episode is finished, but please stay tuned for the next one. Bye. Culture Art is a podcast written and conceived by Federica Pontremoli. The music is by Cruisers. Editing and sound design are by Nicolò Motta.